Hey guys, hoping all is well with everybody. In this video we're going to be continuing the stories of Heroic Dogs by Aloud Jefferson. In this video we're going to be reading the story of Winkie, Chinka, Mickey, and Etta and Kitty. This story is a little lengthy, so I will be breaking this story into two separate videos. But as always, I will be showing you any pictures we may come across, but please feel free to follow along. Every war has its dog heroes. Their actions have been incredible, but there is another type of war dog, the civilian dogs whose comfy lives of walks and treats are shattered by war. Paris has always been the most dog-loving city of the world. Winkie, Chinka, and Mickey were living in Paris at the beginning of World War II. They were tiny dogs, probably French poodles. They were walked on one leash that split into three at the very end, so they walked side by side and didn't stray. They vacationed on the Riviera and sat under restaurant tables all over France accepting goodies. They lived in the center of Paris on the 6th floor of a modern 12th-floor apartment house. The apartment had 5 rooms and a bath. Winkie, Chinka, and Mickey lived with 3 women: Etta Schreiber, Kitty Boropus, and their maid, Margit. The dogs knew the apartment concierge, Madame Buegler, very well, as she was very friendly with the dogs and the women. Etta Schreiber had been a housewife in Manhattan with interests in art and music. Her husband was a wire services chief at a New York newspaper. Etta had been to Paris several times. At first she'd come with her husband. In 1925 she found a little dress shop that made clothing that she liked, and she got to know and like the lady who owned it, Kitty. They became friends. Etta came back to Paris almost every year after that. In 1933, Etta came to Paris with her brother, Irving, for his health. Instead of getting better, he became seriously ill there. Frantic, Etta went to Kitty for help. Kitty found good doctors, but Irving died. Kitty then helped with the funeral and arranged the burial. Kitty even stayed with Etta at her hotel. 3 years later, Etta's husband, William, died. She cabled her sadness to Kitty, who promptly invited Etta to come live in Paris with her. Etta arrived in Paris barely a week later. Kitty was from a wealthy family in England. She married an Italian who passed away. Later, she married a French wine merchant. They didn't divorce, but stopped living in the same apartment. She and Henry had a strange but loving relationship. Kitty opened the dress shop out of boredom, not because she needed the money. The apartment was crammed with furniture, art, and knickknacks the 2 women had brought from their former homes, and when they were living there, they added even more. The dogs had plenty of places to hide and play, but their humans were rather cramped. A little history. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, France and Britain declared war on Germany 2 days later. Nothing much happened during what was called the Quiet War until May 20th, 1940, when Germany invaded France and Belgium. The French, British, and Belgian forces were quickly overcome. They were pushed to the Atlantic coast, where 338,000 were evacuated by military and civilian craft of all kinds from Dunkirk, France. Thousands of other British and French soldiers missed the Dunkirk boats and were marooned in France. Many were captured, but some managed to escape via underground activities in France. On June 13, 1940, German troops entered Paris unopposed. Later, on June 22nd, France and Germany signed an armistice. The terms of the armistice were that Germany would occupy the Atlantic coast of France and the north. An unoccupied zone was established in the south of France under the French government, which had fled from Paris to Vichy. June 13, 1940, Nazis come to Paris. Etta and Kitty did not realize until too late that most people had left Paris, especially the British, who were still fighting the Germans and would be considered enemies. On June 13th, the streets were empty and eerily quiet when they called their embassies and found their governments had deserted the city. Kitty rushed off to get her car while Etta fumbled about trying to figure out what to take with them. Kitty had to do the packing when she returned, and they rushed to the car. The car was a convertible, and the back seat was piled high with their cases. The dogs sat in front on the women's laps. At first there was no traffic, but soon they met the hordes trying to flee south. For over a day they crept forward a foot or so at a time. Finally, Kitty took a side road and was able to drive quite fast. Shortly, however, they met autos coming from the other direction fleeing the Germans. They turned around and followed them. Not long after, as they were approaching the main road again, airplanes swooped down and machine-gunned people and animals along the road. The trembling dogs, Kitty and Etta, cowered in a ditch until the planes finally stopped. German soldiers then crowed in onto the road and they were commanded to return to Paris. The way to the south was blocked. The adventure begins in earnest. On the way back, they stopped at an inn. The proprietor told them that he was out of food, didn't even have sugar for their tea, but they forced their way in. Kitty charmed him into offering tea, with sugar, bread, and cheese. When he heard them speaking English, he asked for help. There was a British airman, William Gray, hiding at the inn who had been left behind at Dunkirk and wanted to get back in the fight. Gray had wanted to buy some civilian clothes, and the innkeeper was having trouble making him understand. If he kept his uniform on and he was captured, he'd be sent to prison. In civilian clothes, he'd be shot immediately. Loyal to her British roots, Kitty wanted to help despite the danger of being executed herself by the Germans. The car had luggage space tucked behind the back of the seat. Gray crawled in there and off they went. They were stopped several times during the trip back to Paris, but no one searched the hidden luggage compartment. They sneaked William into the apartment, and then the fear began. The Germans were going systematically, block by block, checking the resident lists against those they found. The dogs barked whenever anyone came near the door, but the women never did devise a plan. So one day, German officials knocked at the door. Kitty went to the door as slowly as she could, but had to let them in. They searched room by room. Etta was in her bedroom with William. There was nowhere to hide. Getting under the bed would have been silly. Her eyes lit on a photo of her brother Irving. Back at the inn, she'd been taken by William's resemblance to her brother. Within seconds, she had William undress, get into bed, and she placed a wet cloth over his forehead. The Germans bought the story Etta told of her brothers being sick and staying with them to recover. She had her brother's papers. One of the Germans even added her brother's name to the apartment's list of allowed occupants. Later, the women found an underground route for William to escape to the south. This route quickly evaporated. During this time, many of the French collaborated with the Germans and betrayed the underground. Later, anger at food shortages and many restrictions on their lives more French resisted where they could. They were even forbidden to gather in cellars during Allied bombing because the Germans couldn't monitor all of the meetings. And I'm going to stop the video there because this is going to be the end of part 1, but I hope you guys enjoyed the first part of this story, and we'll be continuing part 2 in the next story, so I will hope to see you guys there, and I look forward to seeing you, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for watching.